Amnesia. Uncharted space, far side of the Milky Way. 4217. Ironically, it was his cyber arm that woke Max from a deep and dreamless sleep.
What the hell? Where the devil is the crew?
Maximus Mercurio wiped a mass of blood and grime from his face, orienting himself in the steaming gangway of the fighter bomber. He found himself lying on a wall. The bomber's gravity bubble was off. There was, however, gravity, a rolling pull that pinned him hard to the gangway, 1.5 meters off the floor. A gravity well, he thought. His compact round face glaring around in sudden understanding of danger. A gravity well would mean a world or worse. He gathered his senses. There was a streaming sound against the hull, a decaying orbit, thick air, heavy gravity, a gas giant. Springing to his feet, he steamrolled toward the cockpit. His mind careened with the sudden rocking and shaking of the vessel. With each piston step, he assessed his situation. The gravity bubble was off, thus it was only a matter of time before the pressures outside burned the ship up, crushed them, and sank them in a stream of metallic hydrogen deep in the planet's innards. Something had knocked him on his petard and cut his face open, rendering him unconscious. He had no memory of the event. Where the devil is the crew? Rat-chewing, worm-worshipping refugees. But someone's going to pay with black and blue booty. He balled his fists up and looked this way and that. The floor was now a wall to his left. He cursed in 3 languages and continued down the gangway, avoiding swinging hatches. Who unlocked all the hatch doors? Atmospherics were shot. Steam was blasting everywhere. Nobody was at the helm. Something had happened, something bad. There was a gutted corpse twisted on the floor in front of him. He made his way toward the piloting cabin. Uh-oh, won't be paying any booty. Mercurio paused, put his back against plasticsteel. He pulled out his disser, kept moving. There came a groan of metal fatigue from the ship's hull. Ship's sinking fast. The piloting cabin wasn't empty. Beatrice Allfire, his first officer who had saved his life in the Bowel War, lay on the floor. She had died at her post. He went to her and held her. Faithful unto death, he glared at the room suspiciously with a sharp challenge, but there were no takers. All the rats have jumped ship, and I'm going to Davy Jones's locker like a watership made of cast iron. He slipped on the piloting helmet and merged into the ship's sensors. The merge helmet replaced his sensations and perceptions with the neural net of the starcraft. Where the devil is the crew? Lightning, miles of it, a sea of lightning shuddering in titanic waves and streams, broken by radio storms in sheer walls like mountains, twirling in the far distance, flanked by cliffs of cumulonimbus thunderheads. Falls of super-dense helium glimmered from horizon to horizon, sweeping down to lower layers of the gas giant's atmosphere. His fighter was being swept through the torrent of atmospheric currents with increasing speed. The control and power systems had been shut down. He reactivated them and watched as dozens of programs flashed to life. The fighter bomber's gravity bubble eased into being, braking his descent. Atmospherics, hull nano repair programs, drive systems, then navigationals, all systems returning to normalcy. The fighter made upwards, away from the maddening pressures. This deep in the planet's atmosphere, he was blind. He could be anywhere. Slowly, he gained ever more altitude. The ship's senses were starting to perceive things above the dense layers of hydrogen, helium, and lighting storms. Quasars, the galactic plume. It was somewhere in uncharted space on the far side of the galactic core. The ship wouldn't have just powered down. There were protocols and sequences. Someone had turned it off and left him lying in it, dazed and blooded, falling to an ignoble and unknowable fate. Why hadn't they just killed him? Seas of ball lightning coalesced below him as the planet shrunk away in maddening slowness. The fighter's programs continued to reboot. The seas were the swirling of a Jovian stratosphere now. Above him, the teeming stars and plasma of the atomic clouds roared their fury. The galactic plume showed high. It was giving him the finger. You too, you wicked wench. No sign of the crew. Abandoned ship? Somebody wanted him dead. And this ship lost. No, not lost. Eviscerated back into its primal elements like a thing returned to nature, so rarefied that nothing could ever be found of it. It was like a demon of undoing had carefully unraveled its elements and cast them into a six-dimensional drain. Maximus frowned. Where the devil had that thought come from? There would be booty to pay, but who? Who would dare betray him? Not the gutted corpse in the gangway. That was a self-inflicted wound. Rather than comply with the betrayers, that one had gone down at his hand. No more Ray. Good man, have to be buried with honors when Max winced back to where? Who am I? I'm Maximus Mercurio. 200 pounds of an unforgiving, death-dealing, payback-getting, golden-horned hellcat. Loyal unto death to Harold Stark. Warlord extraordinaire, Don of the Dark Corps, and Avenger of the King. Never forgive. Never forget. Gangsters, thugs, and smugglers, privateers, if you will, not one to be stilettoed in the solar plexus. No wonder they had to get rid of the body, but why hadn't they offed him? Time? What would be their hurry out here in the big bad boonies? Or had they just gone yellow when the time for the dirty deed was done? Perhaps they wanted him to wake, dazed and amazed, as the fighter imploded in the frozen metallic hydrogen. Having his last thoughts go, "Drat, I've been boons waggled," Maximus sneered. No one in the Dark Corps would do it. There was someone else, someone they'd come gunning for. Why was he out here anyway? His mind drew a blank. They'd been on a mission, yes. The mission. Reconnaissance, intelligence, scouting, way the hell out here beyond the settled worlds. The mission. Bits and pieces of his memory were flickering, fading into being. It felt as if someone had reached in his brain, using it for an amusement park simulation. Dizzy, convoluted, and about to rupture. Yet the mission parameters started to coalesce in small increments perceptibly. It was an unusual assignment. General Harry Stark only trusted Max, the bulldozer, the golden-horned bulldog. A Cyborgian general had gone rad, slipped the Overlord's command chain, was assembling his alliances to fight some kind of new life form. The Dark Corps of the Pleiades had been given a choice. A smuggler they'd been stalking threw them a twist, dragged half the Cyborgian Air Corps after them, then unexpectedly the general had pivoted, joined the fight, or deal with the authorities. Stark had damn near died laughing. "Sign us up, we'll fight your damn boogeyman." Max had laughed right along. He wasn't laughing now. He scanned the far horizons of his flight path for any evidence of other ships. Fleeing betrayers, scooting back to whatever hovel betraying rat chewers go to. He wasn't surprised to find nothing. Not even an irregular wake in the zero-wave cycle. Zip. He sneered at the magnificent galaxy spread out before him. The billions of stars, the galactic plume, the aurora plasma streaming into the huge void. He slipped out of the merge helmet. The interior of the attack ship hummed back at him, telling nothing. "Okay, you little boneheads. Let's see what old Maximus can discover today." He set about looking for clues at the scene of the crime.
"As you've done unto my men, so will be done unto you."
Every crew member batten down and in combat gear now.
General Vega Oser, Outspace Fleet Commander, despised his meetings with his Cyborgian overlord superior Om-6X. Oser and the Air Corps were not part of the Cyborgian hive mind. They could neither fathom its temptation nor delight in its unrealities. It was a particularly foggy patch of Capital World. General Oser's air limo darted along with towers a mere 100 stories in the air, once the heights of power perhaps, but over the centuries just another bunch of tower levels left behind in the race toward ever more impressive heights. Oser had seen it many times before with dread, the tower and halls of his overlord Cyborgian direct superior. Oser was Air Corps traditionally removed from the hive mind for the sake of autonomy raised from birth in a special warrior caste. His overlord contact, Om-6X, was an ancient post-human entity. Om, like all the Cyborgians, had whatever remained of their most recent clone incarnation tanked somewhere safe while their sentience romped in virtual worlds of their whim and will. The Cyborgians were among the most ancient of mankind. In direct control of its largest and most powerful ancient empire, Om and his ilk sickened Oser. Their bizarre indulgences, obtuse and useless intellectual pursuits, these seemed ever and ever more at odds with managing the society they ruled. Instead of practical or even possible objectives, an endless sequence of disastrous fiats, programs and reconfigurations of social engineering which made him want to puke. That these lunatics and refugees from reason were in charge of civil society was bad enough. That they were the ultimate authority over the use of force was a pure theater of the absurd. At every meeting with Om, Baroque stylization and surreal symbolism laced his every word with games and multiple meanings. Enough with the games, Om. Enough theatrics. His air limo landed and he made his way into the halls of Overlord Om-6X. An android female styled with long butterfly wings guided him. Someone's idea of public art.
Walk this way, please. Welcome to the halls of Om.
The halls of OM-6X glistened about General Vega Oser in a ghostly manner, losing opacity. Oser grimaced. Om was going to put on a virtual show for his amusement, and the penalty of a wrong move would be an unvirtual death. Om's large head full of snakes smiled hugely, and a tuberous baritone laugher croaked out like a death throat. Oser wondered what happened to the transhuman Cyborgian overlords in their long centuries of rule. What was it in the hive mind that predicated all their bizarre, elaborate behaviors? Surely nothing good. Oser smiled back and steeled his fear. Om could conceivably torture him here for years upon years. How long before the Overlord would break his spirit, at least in real space? In the real universe, death could only take him once.
Ready to ride, Starman?
Gallantly, sir, the general said coolly. If he was to be broken, tortured and racked, better to do it with style. They were suddenly riding in a herd of giant tarantulas. The thundering of the thousands of spider legs was deafening. Om was wearing a cowboy hat like the ones of the Pampas. The herd was stampeding. Oser looked down at the creature he found himself on and froze with disgust. On 1,000 worlds, he'd never seen such an awful thing.
Shopping with the decorators.
The thunder spiders rode on across a broad purple plain. They pursued fleeing impala-like creatures. Oser recognized the impala beasts as a variation of something he'd seen once in a nature hologram program, but couldn't recall their name. Om gave him a sidelong glance.
I understand you haven't found the 6,500 assassins. Mercenaries I sent you out to Ocho's world for. Hoo-yah.
Om waved his big cowboy hat. Tell me the truth now, General, and perhaps I'll let you walk out of here without taking your head off and feeding it to my spider pets. Oser patted the big spider's back. No, sir.
Are you sure of that?
Sir, I'm an officer. I have my duty to defend. The spiders and the planes disappeared, and the two of them were suddenly back in Om's favorite halls, the baths of Caracalla, circa the 2nd century. Om's big cowboy hat was still on his head, though. A little snake peered out. Now I live or die.
Yes, I'm sure. The question is, who defines your duty?
They looked at each other, and Oser knew he suspected everything. No, not suspected, he knew. But God was in the details, and Oser hadn't given him that.
General, I believe you will do what needs to be done. I'm a pencil pusher. We overlords, well, we administer civilization to the civilized. You, however, administer its opposite to the uncivilized. Be careful of riding tarantulas out there. In the real universe, where you play, they can't be made to run and stop with a programming signal. Whatever game you're playing with the felonious rogues in the star lanes better come up aces, or I'll feed your burnt fanny up for din-din.
Oser raised an eyebrow. Om's way of warning caution. How nice, he cared. I'll be careful.
I know you will. Vega me, soldier boy. My spider pets here. They're a children's hologram program to what you'll be facing soon. I know someone was sniffing around in the Imperial archives. Whatever you found there remains in tight military circles. However, you're defining that these days. I suspect that is taking a pretty wide orbit, but again, it's your call. The public finds out about exterior and undetermined non-human threats to our hegemony, and civilization will collapse in 6 weeks, 3 days, and 37 hours. Oh yes, and that's an optimistic estimation. I spent a decade once just running over scenarios. Of course, life would go on. Just what manner of life will it be? Humanity has tolerated all manner of strange arrangements in its long and twisted story, General.
Oser knew better than to ask permission to speak freely. Om was already showing signs of distress. If the conversation kept going, the giant, ancient overlord could slip into madness. Fear edged his words. Not fear, no panic. Holy terror.
But of course.
Good then. Do your thing. Find a way. Win, Starman. I'll be watching your back here at dinner. Any of the other overlords tap my databanks. I've set up an ugly relay that leaves a nasty taste in their mouths, and I can vouch for you. As long as you win. Now, go do your job. Break things and kill people, or better yet, break people and kill things. Things. The things that keep me awake.
Oser turned to answer, but he stood alone suddenly in the antechamber. A golden woman with butterfly wings was waiting to take him to his air limo.
Have a nice day, General Oser,
she said glowingly. The air limo bolted into the crowded stream of traffic, and Oser sighed.
Call from Harry Stark on the line. Sir.
The driver said in reassuring military crispness, "Right, computer, make a gin and tonic and make it a double."
Yes, General Grant.
Don't be a smartass. Harry floated in the holomap of the Milky Way and ran his hands through the stars. On the other side of space, there was a limo interior with a man drinking gin. About 50,000 light years high, Harry mused. "What have you got?"
We analyzed the data you sent and figured out the hyper signature from the tapes. When the thing came out of hyper and grabbed the workman, there were distinct patterns and spatial distortion, ripples in time. I sent out several ships on an arc trajectory above the galactic plane, dropping drones into space set to look for that particular hypersignature. Lo and behold, a number of them indicated activity that matched.
He paused a long, dreary moment, and Oser thought, now the bad news.
One of my crews hasn't reported back. They're out there deep, past the frontiers, past the core.
Marauders?
No such luck. My people eat marauders for lunch. I've caught these guys hunting marauders on vacation. They call that surfing safari. No,
This is war. You can't anticipate everything, Mr. Stark. We're dealing with an unknown enemy. Oser offered consolation. Only another commander who had lost men could do so.
These men were all survivors of unknown factors.
Harry remembered the carnage of the ground wars at Baal 1. He was young. The enemy had acquired a new weapon. The death toll had been brutal.
They're all veterans, fearless, ruthless, and motivated. If none of them could survive an attack of one of your spookies, we might be looking at the extinction of our species.
Give me his coordinates. I'll send an attack ship out there for recon.
Any new toys?
I'm working on a hyper-fritzer.
Which is?
Sort of like a dimensional grenade. They stick their heads into our dimensional space. We drop a nice wall of multi-dimensional shear into the opening. Part of them slides into the 5th dimension, part into the 6th, another part into the 7th, etc.
I like it.
Harry's smile was feral. Once he'd been awed by a Titian painting to the point of tears. With time and experience, he'd learned to appreciate the beauty of a well-honed gravity bomb or even a simple stiletto. Mercurio found 3 more corpses in the fighter. There wasn't much left of them. There were traces of fights all over the ship, blood, broken things. But there was nothing in the ship's log. The black box was gone. That was a new one. There was blood there too. His hypercaster had a human head bashed into it. He could recognize who it had been. A good soldier, a close friend. The body was on the other side of the room. More indications of conflict. Indications that their opponents embraced brute savagery. Maximus steeled his rage. He silently tabulated each record of a firefight and each lost comrade for a payback date and multiplied them by 10. He checked the body and found some cash and a fake ID. That had been Achilles' bell. Of course, the ID didn't say that, but Max knew. He knew all the aliases. Made sense too. Bell would have defended communications. He was the first mate, but why bash in the caster with his head? They could have used a hammer. This was hatred here beyond mere war. The crew had fought back. It looked like they pissed off their adversary. You've got to be one sick degenerate to get so angry as to rip the man's head off and use it as a tool. Max remembered Baal 1. They hadn't taken prisoners. As you've done unto my men, thus will be done unto you, sewer slime. Max felt his eyes grow dark. Why couldn't he remember? There was something special about this op, something important that he needed to remember. The targets were... It skirted the edge of his consciousness, just out of reach. Like someone had tweaked his brain. Could they do that? Out here, deep space, no labs, on board a small fighter, close quarters, hand-to-hand combat, and then drag in medical equipment to mess with his grey matter. He growled, "Rat-chewing, worm-worshipping cowards." How had they gotten on board? Last port of call? No. Max dropped back into merge and set the fighter on a heavy rush into hyper, heading back for civilization. He might encounter marauders when he set over the galactic core. Alone, that would be no surfing safari. But he'd get through. A good story for next when he hit the taverns. The small fighter streamed into zero space and Max felt the gleaming winds of the hyper-gamma spaces brush his cheeks. He watched for hyper trails like a starving hawk. Somebody was going to give him some sweet red payback tale. He only wished he could remember who. The last of the pig monkeys was howling as Baba Yaga ate its face. She dropped its ugly little body back into the flat dimensions, felt the thrill of its fear, and then stretched in delight at her superiority. She could see far into the intergalactic black, the horde coming, a hunt. A feast would be, a whole galaxy of fearful beings. Oh! She hears in the resonance of high dimension her roar of ecstasy, the kill, the kill. The fears she had explored in the corners of their flat world minds. Yummy, so good, the electricity running through its mind, coursing through the organic patterns of flat world flesh. Pathetic creatures. Except for the one pig monkey. Her anger raged around the dimensional curls and she rolled on over the flows of radiance, seething, hating. No matter what corner of its brain she searched, she found no fears to taste. The others, they were strong, and she had to work to find the drug of fear, flashing through the dimensions of their memories deep into their lives, their past, the things pushed away, the shadow things repressed. That one, he was the strongest. Defeat haunted her. He'd looked at her squarely and kept coming. She remembered the bitter taste of his mind. It had repelled her. She couldn't kill him, nor could she let him live to tell his tale. If the other pig monkeys figured how he'd eluded death, it would be a disaster for the Horde. With his primitive scootercraft, so weak these preposterous flat-world affronts to the universe they need a device for everything, scuttled into the belly of a gravity well. She'd watched him sink to his doom.
Winter-out soul, from 2 centuries among the ruins.
It's a thing that rolls in ashes, dreams in shadowlands, drinks toasts with the dead, hears their shocked tears with each turning of derelict worlds, spinning celestial threads, crying gone, gone, all is gone.
It occurred to Gibbon, when Winter-out's convulsions started again, that stretching one's mind along 4-dimensional string echoes may not be an adaptive mutation. The chromium droid was merged with Winter-out and could see the visions which the historian was enduring. Above the ruins, a transparent and sinister starport that was no longer appeared to live out its last horrible moments like echoes on a holoscreen speaking unfinished phrases over and over. Ghost hologram graphics glittered over the Phantom Terminal, New Galen starport, gateway to the galaxy.
Hold tight, good friend. You'll snap out of it momentarily.
The reality was, more often than not, the historian slipped into a coma. His chromium droid grabbed at Winter-out's shaking form then and injected him with a sedative. The convulsions eased to mere tremors, and Winter-out eyed his surroundings with a strange resignation and sedated fascination.
So many dead, look at them, Gibbon.
I see them, sir. I'm merged with you. Truly a calamity.
Winter-out steadied himself and considered his course of action. For 2 centuries they had been coming back here trying to solve the mystery of the green echoes, Starliner ghosts that had a green tint rather than tan. Winter-out could see the ghosts of crowds moving through the empty terminal. In the piles of skeletons, he could see individuals in their last days, waiting for rescue and aid that never came. The visions flashed and flickered. He saw glass walls imploding, fireballs scorching the confused crowds. Winter-out's eyes raced to the landing strips, chasing the edge of an idea. He saw the wreckage of starliners caught moments before liftoff, tan ghosts. But there were other ghost liners, forever lifting off, some of which were not tan, but a turquoise-greenish hue.
Something new among the ashes.
Winter-out's eyes scanned the strips again and again, something new, something we haven't seen 1,000 times before, something new, the turquoise trails. Gibbon looked out at the airstrip and saw the giant caskets the starliners had become, dissolving derelicts that had once been the stuff of star dreams. Even their burnished alloy wonders had crept toward ugly decay.
Something new, sir?
Both sensed it was there, staring them in the face, of course. It was looking back at them, like the faces in the porthole window from the green ghost liners, smiling and waving as they set off to their destinations which were never reached. Never reached because most of the liners would make emergency landings deep in the Sagittarius frontier upon finding that Cyborgian Central Command had nuked their home worlds. The ones that made it off-world before the fireballs were already in the hyper-gamma spaces.
You have a hypothesis, sir?
What if their distinct and different light is a function of their relationship to their progeny? They may have proceeded outward and onward to people living now. Perhaps in that sense, unlike everything else we see here, they are still alive among the outworlds.
But of course, sir! What other explanation could there be?
Actually, Gibbon, most probably an infinite number. But let's run with this for a moment. If we follow the ghost trails to the outworlds, which we know the survivors settled, we could see those very ships. Most are enshrined on their various worlds as venerated objects. Is the universe so convoluted that among the celestial and immense tides of the cosmos, that the veneration of infinitesimal beings such as humans would be noticed, or reflected in the quanta?
Perhaps the veneration explains the green lights?
Perhaps the sheer complexity of human sentience is its own form of immensity. If so, we could trace the green strings out across space to the various worlds, and look into the faces of their descendants.
And so we are voyaging on?
Winterhout was scanning the airstrips.
In time, Gibbon. In time. Choose. Why does this place call me back? This starport, this terminal, looking out on this airstrip beckoning. You see, Gibbon, something new was the key. The green ones, nay, they survived, and the life forces of their passengers are passed on, even now, ever into the future something new. That brightest and oscillating one, that is the one. That is the one.
Winterhout had neither kith nor kin in the Sagittarius arm, and was therefore not as free as air, but he was as free as the income of a wealthy scion would permit a man to be. Under the circumstances, as he and Gibbon had already noted, the green trails all pointed to the Sagittarius arm. They would naturally gravitate there. That great menagerie into which all refugees of the Arcturian War had irresistibly drained. Thus emboldened, they began to make haste to their starcraft, when suddenly a ghost of a thought came to Winterhout. Moments like this, and he felt the ghosts knew he was there. Winterhout knew it was a ghost thought connected to the liner trail they were to follow. He saw a vision man standing at the rain-soaked window, watching the liner take off.
Fly on, lovely one. Take the stars and make them your own. I'll remember holding you tenderly while you slept. Fly on free, free and bright as ever, and always you were. Looking out from here, I'll stand eternity on guard, watching you take to the heavens and wishing angels stand about you. Fly on, lovely one, ever and always bright.
Then come the fireballs, vicious and unrelenting heat which swept away worlds and civilizations. Yet somehow it is unable to erase a moment's tender love, safe in the time continuum, standing at a window in the rain. Time and the hosts of Hades fear to tread. In a sense, the man at the window stood as he promised, on guard for all eternity, wishing her well, whoever she was. Winterhout hoped she had been aboard the liner. He felt the thought again, the word echoing in the continuum, but there were no more. Perhaps at the far end of the journey he could look into the eyes of one of her descendants, carry the man's love to rest in the living of her progeny. Would he know? The big old starliner had carried her so far away. He turned to the droid.
Well then, Gibbon, my good friend. Onward to the outworlds in the Sagittarius spiral arm. Let's see where this story leads us next.
Clarissa Maggio, Deneb 4, Empire of Light and Darkness.
I've prepared a clone body for you, Cicero. You're going to be my agent in the physical realm for a season. Consider it an adventure of great import. We must determine the nature of that which decides which men are driven to madness, while others are left standing on new worlds, founding nations on planets of barely charted stars. Your flesh again on the outside. Flesh enough to command any man you'll meet to do your bidding, I imagine. But of course, you're cyborgian, Cicero. Throughout your skeleton, various nanosystems are incorporated that will allow you a number of, well, limited powers, shall we say. You'll have access to the hive mind, but that, my pretty, will have its limits once you go deep out space. A full rundown of your system will be presented to you later. You're a masterpiece, Sissy, a real work of art. Beauty and the Beast all rolled into one, our very own femme fatale. You have two things to remember, lest you go AWOL on us. One, your body is real. You're a genetically engineered superwoman. Your lifespan, without enhancement, is 5 centuries, so you have something to live for. I've persuaded the Overlord Council to waive entirely the charges for treason that had been pressed against you from your previous incarnation. Secondly, well, there's this. I suggest you don't look at it until you've given yourself a few days to acclimate yourself to the real universe again. It's rather disturbing.